Hey, my name is Justice Stokes. I'm here giving a presentation on the grand narrative of the gospel as I would explain it to someone from Brazil. And the first part of that would be Act 1, God establishes his kingdom. In the creation story, God created all of the animals and the birds and the colors and all these things, the universe, all the things that we enjoy. And at the end of it, on day 6, he says, or towards the end, he creates man. He creates man from the dust. And he says, he looks at all of it and he says it's good. It's something that we can be truly grateful for. That, of course, that God created all of the things that we can look at and love and enjoy and take joy in, take delight in. And God created humanity and then actually looks at humanity and says it's not good for the man to be alone. And so he creates Eve, and then we have, right from that, we have communion, we have fellowship. We have marriage. It's the first time we see all of these things that I think we can say for certain are some of the greatest gifts that man has given to us. When we even look at things like saudade and esperança, like all these expressions and the nostalgia and the emotions of them. It's all of the things that come from that and the things surrounding it, like carnaval and communion and fellowship. It's the root of those things come from the creation story. They come from the fact that we're made in God's image. It's something we can be super grateful for. Rebellion is the rebellion of the kingdom is something that we see where Satan actually deceived Eve, and Satan crept into paradise and deceived Eve, and then all of a sudden all hearts were turned away from humanity. All hearts were from God. All of our hearts were darkened by sinful nature. Coldness came, and we allowed ourselves to be deceived. Humanity allowed themselves to be deceived through Adam and Eve, and now we have a sinful nature. Like all these things we see, we also see, in creation we see something a bit more collectivistic, not like individualistic like we are in America, but we see it's actually leans more towards collectivism and this joy and delight that we are supposed to have with each other, not be so independent of each other that we feel the need to be not reliant on each other or not completely independent. But no, it actually leans more collectivistic. It's not less individualistic in the sense of community and fellowship and relationship with God. And with the rebellion, it's like the power distance that kind of can be created in a misunderstanding of that is something we need to avoid, where regardless of social group or status, we all are sinful. We all have sinful nature, and regardless of that power distance, regardless of our status or social group, we're all equal in God's kingdom. We're all equally loved. We have the same inherent sin nature, but we are all equal. And then later on, after all this happens, God chooses Israel through Abraham. And despite, Israel's failings, he chooses them as his people. He chooses them, and he chooses to be their king. He decides to bless Abraham, and who fathered the 12 tribes of Israel, who sinned many times. They sinned throughout the Old Testament, and they fell and were judged throughout the whole Testament. But then we get prophets and kings like David, Solomon, Hezekiah, the line from which Jesus came. And it got blessed through Israel as well. And we just see this cooperation where Israel, anytime Israel cooperated with God, they were blessed. God worked with Israel. He loved them. He was faithful to them. And he faithfully blessed them whenever they drew near to him. Their loyalty in God resulted in blessing directly. That was something that was directly stated by God in the terms of his covenant that he made with Israel. is loyalty to him and obedience to him would lead to blessing. And then we see after that, we see the coming of the king. We see Jesus starts to come on the scene, coming from the line of David, who God promised to bless. He promised to bless King David's line and actually bring the messianic deliverer from David's line and David's blood. And then we see, despite our disloyalty and despite our rebellion, God sent a friend, Jesus Christ, as a human. He actually bankrupted heaven itself. God, in the form of the Son, came down in a human form, lived a full earthly life, experienced everything that we experienced, the emotion, he experienced the sadness and the anger and the nostalgia and everything that we can say for certain is like are things that, that are good or bad, that we enjoy or don't enjoy. He experienced all of it and died on a cross for us. He was the perfect sacrifice, where before they would have to have sacrifices, and now Jesus comes on the scene and gives his life as the perfect sacrifice, gives his life in the greatest act of love that has ever been. And we see then that we now have the greatest friend interceding for us in heaven itself. Our greatest friend died for us and is now interceding on our behalf on the cross. And now we have this, we can have this long-term orientation of, this is what awaits us. So the short term is not what matters the most. Actually, the long term is, because eternally, the long term is what matters the most. The end of our lives here on earth, and then the rest of eternity in heaven. We can get this long-term orientation. We can enjoy the moment and have a short-term orientation in a very healthy and good way, but ultimately it is the long-term orientation and the stewardship that is going to really help us and really we're called to live by for God. And then we see the gospel spread throughout the entire known world in a very short amount of time. And it's because of the church, because of Christ's body here on earth, which he created. And our mission then is to give the world what Christ has given to us. His love has spread throughout so much of the known world that now we are called to give the love that God has given to us out to others and pour it out onto all the people around us. Because God gave us the greatest gift, so we are called to give out and pour out the greatest gift ever given to us. And we find this balance between universalism and particularism, where there are universal commands that God has given to man, but then there's also the particularism, which is God has said to work out your own fear with fear and trembling in Philippians. And so there are individual convictions that we are supposed to have. But then there's a balance between the individual rules that all of us are called to follow, and there's the nuance of God putting things on our hearts and giving us our own personal convictions as we work out our salvation with fear and trembling, and just learn to balance that and follow God through all of it and just have simple obedience. And then finally, in Revelation, we see the coming of Christ, the second, who will bring the ultimate victory. And we see through all this apocalyptic imagery and symbolism that ultimately, despite all of the horrible things that we've gone through and will go through, which is a promise in Scripture, we also see that he has already won the victory. And we see this image of a wedding banquet, actually, when he comes. The wedding banquet of the Lamb, the greatest joy, the greatest party that could ever be. We see it, and then we get to have the joy knowing what is to come, and be imparted with peace and with strength, and even the things that we see bringing it back to Carnival, in Brazil. That's something that, those parties and the emotions surrounding them and the joy and the delight. It's God delights in the joy and the delighting parts of it. He loves it when our hearts are so filled with joy. And so then we get to read about the wedding banquet of the Lamb and recognize that we have all been called to enjoy it with the Lord and enjoy the warmth and glory of God's presence for the rest of eternity. And he's called us to that. He wants you to give your life to him so that you can experience it with him and be in his presence for the rest of eternity. It's an amazing thing. I hope you're able to give your life to Jesus and experience that same thing. It's an amazing thing. So, thanks for listening to me. I mean, it's amazing.